This ancient knowledge explains why your suffering unlocks super spiritual gifts. There's something the ancient masters knew that we've forgotten, something so profound that it changes the way we look at pain, suffering, and the darkest moments of our lives. They didn't see suffering as punishment. They didn't label it as bad luck or random misfortune. No, these elders, mystics, sages, and spiritual warriors saw suffering as an initiation, a sacred fire that burns away illusion, a coded experience designed to awaken something dormant in the soul. They understood that life doesn't just happen to us, it happens for us. And inside the most brutal chapters of our lives are keys. Keys that unlock what I call super spiritual gifts. Abilities, awareness, and wisdom that remain hidden until we are brought to our knees, until we're cracked open, until we're humbled enough to stop running, stop pretending, and finally remember who we really are. Let me take you back to the root of this knowledge. In the temples of ancient Egypt, the initiates were not chosen because they were perfect. They were chosen because they were willing to endure the sacred trials. They were submerged into darkness, physically and mentally. They were isolated, overwhelmed, stripped of identity. Why? Because the soul awakens when the ego breaks. Because the light that lives inside us doesn't reveal itself in comfort, it reveals itself in chaos. And it's the same with you. Every heartbreak you've endured, every betrayal, every illness, every loss, every night you cried out asking the universe, why me? That was part of your initiation. Not because the universe is cruel, but because you carry within you something ancient, something vast, something that can only be unlocked through the alchemy of suffering.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
I know this sounds intense, and it is, but here's the truth. Suffering is not your enemy, it is your teacher. It is the hidden curriculum of the soul. And once you understand how it works, you stop feeling like a victim of life and start becoming a master of energy, of perception, of reality itself. You start to see every painful experience as a coded message, a lesson, a reflection, a mirror. And more importantly, you begin to extract the gift hidden inside, because every pain holds a power. Every breakdown carries a breakthrough, but only if you know how to look deeper. So why do we suffer? Not just in the physical sense, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically. It's because the soul came here to remember, and in order to remember, it must experience contrast. You don't know who you really are until you face what you are not. You don't access compassion until you've been broken. You don't access strength until you've felt helpless. You don't access your intuitive sight until the world around you becomes too dark to navigate logically. Suffering forces us to reach inward, to unlock dormant capacities we didn't even know we had. It's in the moments of desperation that the soul finally speaks. Think about it. When did you feel most connected to something beyond yourself? Was it during a perfect day? Or was it during a moment of pain so deep that you had no choice but to surrender? That moment, that collapse of the ego, that's the threshold. That's the point where the veil thins, where your true self steps forward. And from that space, gifts begin to awaken. You begin to see with spiritual eyes. You begin to feel energy, not just emotions. You begin to hear the whispers of intuition louder than the noise of fear. That's not coincidence, that's activation. The ancient texts spoke of this over and over. The Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the teachings of the Desert Fathers, the shamanic maps of the Andes, every tradition points to the same truth. The way in is through the fire, not around it, not above it, through it. Because the fire is not here to destroy you, it's here to reforge you, to burn away the false self so the true spirit can rise. And when it does, you stand in a power that is not force. It is present. It is clarity. It is knowing. That is what the ancient ones called divine remembrance. Now, let's get practical. What do you do when you're in the middle of suffering, when it feels like your world is falling apart? You pause, you breathe, you stop trying to escape it, and you face it. You ask a deeper question: what is this pain trying to show me? What part of me is being asked to evolve? Because the moment you stop resisting and start listening, the energy begins to shift. The pain becomes a portal. The suffering becomes sacred. You alchemize it, not by denying it, but by feeling it fully and extracting its wisdom. And that wisdom becomes your gift. Some of you will awaken psychic abilities, clairvoyance, clairaudience, energy healing. Others will access profound empathy, the ability to feel others' pain and transmute it into light. Others will birth creative genius, soul art, revolutionary ideas. These are not fantasy. These are the real gifts that suffering unlocks when transmuted consciously. But you must be willing to go all the way in. You must be brave enough to sit with yourself in the dark. Because the ones who sit in the dark long enough become the bearers of light. The ancient knowledge wasn't just about rituals and temples, it was about transformation through experience. It was about becoming something more because you chose to meet your suffering with awareness instead of resistance. And the ones who did, they became the healers, the seers, the teachers, the ones who could walk between worlds. That is what you're being called into now. Not because you're broken, but because you're ready. Your suffering is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your awakening. So, I'll ask you now, what gift is waiting to be born from your pain? What are you still resisting that's actually trying to initiate you? What if your greatest heartbreak is the exact key to your highest power? The hidden codes of pain, ancient teachings on the sacred initiation of the soul. There's a reason why the ancient initiates were taken into darkness before they were ever shown the light. There's a reason why shamans across cultures go through near-death experiences, why monks sit silently for years, why mystics isolate themselves in caves, why prophets wander the desert. It's not because suffering is a punishment, it's because suffering is a passage, a portal, a sacred code embedded into the matrix of reality that, when decoded, unlocks not just wisdom, but evolution. You see, pain is not just an emotional reaction, it is a language, and those who learn to read it begin to access dimensions of the soul that most never even touch. The ancient ones understood this. They taught that the soul is not some fragile thing that needs to be protected from discomfort. The soul is indestructible. It is forged in divine fire, and that fire is not outside of us, it is us. But in order to remember this, we must be tested, not because the universe wants to see us suffer, but because the soul's deepest gifts remain dormant until adversity calls them forth. This is the sacred contract of incarnation. You didn't come here to play it safe. You came here to remember who you are, and the only way to truly remember is to forget and then reclaim your power. When you suffer, you are not being broken, you are being initiated. Initiation means to begin again. It means to be stripped of previous identities, beliefs, and attachments so that something more authentic can take their place. Pain is the cosmic scalpel. It removes what is false. And when you stop resisting it, when you stop numbing it, when you stop running from yourself and instead turn toward the ache, you begin to hear the teachings hidden within it. You begin to decode the messages that pain carries, and every message is a map leading you back to your soul. Let's go deeper. Think about the pain you've carried for years, maybe even decades. Maybe it's the abandonment from a parent, the betrayal from someone you trusted, the failure that shattered your confidence, the illness that robbed you of your vitality. Whatever it is, ask yourself this: what if that pain wasn't just something to survive? What if it was the exact friction your soul needed to awaken something dormant inside of you? Because the truth is, every wound is a wound. Every scar is a potential source of light, but only if you're willing to mine it. Only if you're willing to go back into the fire, not to suffer again, but to retrieve the part of you that was buried there. In the Egyptian temples, initiates weren't told what to believe, they were put through experiences. They would be submerged underwater in pitch-black chambers, they would go without food, they would face psychological torment, and only those who could hold their inner light through the darkness would emerge as teachers. Why? Because until you've faced your own shadow, you can't hold space for someone else's. Until you've met death, whether literal or symbolic, you can't truly embody life. The ancient teachings were not about avoiding pain, they were about transcending it by entering it fully. That is the secret mystery modern society has forgotten. Today we are taught to fear discomfort, to medicate it, to escape it. But what if the pain you're avoiding is actually your training ground? What if every time you suppress your grief, you delay your ascension? What if the anxiety you feel is not a curse, but a signal that something powerful is trying to awaken inside you? The ancient ones would say, sit with it, feel it, let it speak, because buried within every ache is a truth you have not yet heard. And when that truth is revealed, it sets you free, not just from the pain, but from the illusions that caused it. This is the real spiritual path, not the watered-down version that promises love and light without depth, but the path that transforms your entire being, the path that asks everything of you, and in return gives you everything your soul came here to receive. Your pain is not in the way, it is the way. It's how you access your superpowers. It's how you become so attuned to the unseen, so empathic, so intuitively sharp, so divinely connected, that you begin to walk through the world as a living embodiment of sacred energy. That's not fantasy. That's what happens when pain becomes purpose, when wounds become wisdom, when suffering becomes sacred. So I ask you, from the deepest place within your being, where in your life are you still avoiding the pain that's trying to awaken you? What if the place you fear the most, that aching corner of your heart, is the exact place where your greatest power is hidden? And what if facing it, fully and without armor, is the key to unlocking the gifts you were born to bring into this world? The power hidden in rock bottom. Why losing everything is the beginning of real awakening. There's a moment that comes in every seeker's life. A moment so raw, so devastating, that it feels like the end of everything. We call it rock bottom, the collapse, the point where all the masks fall off, all the plans fall apart, and the life you thought was yours crumbles into dust. But what if I told you that this is not the end? What if I told you that rock bottom is not your destruction, but your birthplace? That losing everything is not punishment, it's permission. Permission for the real you to finally rise. Because when you have nothing left to protect, nothing left to prove, nothing left to cling to, you're finally free to become. You see, the ancient ones understood the sacredness of the fall. In their initiations, they simulated death, not just physical death, but ego death, identity death, the death of everything the initiate believed they were. Why? Because only in that void, that terrifying emptiness, can the soul's true essence begin to emerge. When everything external is stripped away, what remains is the eternal. It's in that space, that silence, that deep aching nothingness, where you finally meet the part of you that cannot be destroyed. And once you meet that part, once you remember that you are not your job, your relationships, your bank account, your health, or even your thoughts, you become unbreakable. Rock bottom is initiation by force. It's the universe's way of saying, you've outgrown this version of yourself, let it burn, and we fight it. Oh, we fight it. We try to hold on, patch the cracks, pretend everything's fine. But the soul is wise. It knows what needs to die, and if we refuse to surrender gently, the fall comes anyway, louder, harder, more complete. Not to punish us, to purify us, to empty us so completely that only truth remains. And in that truth, the gifts begin to emerge, the super spiritual gifts, the abilities that were buried beneath the noise of our old life. Let me tell you something very few will. You are more powerful broken than you ever were pretending to be whole. Because when you're broken, you're real. You're open, you're humble. You're finally able to hear the whispers of the divine that were drowned out by your pride, your plans, your performance. That's when the downloads come, that's when your intuition sharpens. That's when your hands begin to heal, your voice begins to move hearts, your presence begins to shift rooms. Not because you gained something, but because you lost what was never yours to begin with. So what's really happening at rock bottom? You're being recalibrated. Your frequency is being reset. You're being stripped of false alignments so you can finally align with your soul's true mission. It's a sacred vacuum. And yes, it hurts like hell, but if you can sit in that fire without running, without numbing, without blaming the world, you'll start to see the architecture of your awakening. You'll see the divine intelligence behind every loss, every betrayal, every failure. You begin to thank the pain, not resent it, because it's only when you're emptied that you become a vessel for the sacred. And here's the paradox. The deeper you fall, the higher you rise. The longer you've wandered, the more profound you're remembering. The more you've suffered, the more light you can hold. That's the law of balance. The soul that's been to the underworld walks with a kind of radiance the world can't fake. You've seen it in people. The ones who've lost everything but still carry peace in their eyes. The ones who've suffered deeply and now speak with clarity, with authority, with love that doesn't shake. That's not luck. That's initiation. That's what happens when you let rock bottom become your altar. So if you're there now, if you're in the collapse, in the grief, in the not knowing, pause, breathe. You're not failing, you're transforming. You're in the sacred chrysalis where the ego dies and the soul takes leadership. Don't rush it. Don't try to rebuild too quickly. Let the silence speak. Let the ashes settle. And then ask your soul gently, What part of me is being born now through this loss? Because something is, always. The phoenix doesn't rise despite the fire, it rises because of it. And when you emerge, because you will, you won't just be healed, you'll be initiated. You'll carry wisdom that can't be learned in books. You'll have eyes that see through illusion, a heart that no longer fears the unknown, and a presence that awakens others just by being. That is the power of rock bottom. That is the secret the ancients passed down in whispers, in symbols, in sacred rites. That is the treasure buried beneath your suffering. So now I ask you, what are you still holding on to that the fire is asking you to release? What would happen if you stopped trying to fix your life and instead allowed it to rebirth you? What if rock bottom isn't the end, but the sacred beginning you've been waiting for, becoming the gift? How to use your pain to activate a higher calling. There comes a moment after the storm has passed, after the fire has burned through everything you thought you were, when the silence becomes sacred. You're no longer the person you were before the pain. You've been dismantled, undone, rewritten, and now something stirs within you, a quiet knowing, a whisper from the deepest part of your soul. You didn't go through all that just to survive, you went through it to become the gift. This is where the journey turns. This is where suffering, once your shadow, becomes your offering to the world. Because everything you've endured wasn't random, it was a preparation. Each scar on your heart is a doorway to someone else's healing. Each time you broke was a lesson in empathy, in compassion, in truth. The world doesn't need more polished perfection. It needs you in your rawness, your wisdom, your lived experience. You are not here to just heal. You are here to embody healing itself, to be the one who walks into the room and makes others feel safe without saying a word, to be the one who sees through people's masks, not to expose them, but to remind them of their light. This is the real spiritual gift, the ability to alchemize your pain into power, your trauma into truth, your wounds into wisdom. You don't need to wait until you're fully healed to share your light. You don't need to have it all figured out to begin. In fact, it's your imperfection, your humanness, that makes your presence real. Authenticity is the transmission, vulnerability is the medicine. And when you stop hiding your story and start owning it, something incredible happens. People start to awaken around you, not because you taught them, but because you showed them what's possible. The deepest calling isn't something you find, it's something that finds you when you're finally ready to stop running from your past. You start to see that your pain was never in the way, it was the way. It shaped you into someone who can walk between worlds, who can hold space for both the sacred and the shattered. And from that space you begin to serve, not out of obligation, not to be seen, but because your soul longs to give what it never received. You become the light you once begged for. You become the guide you once prayed for. You become the embodiment of the gift. This is the final alchemy, to realize that what you thought was your curse is actually your calling, that the very thing you thought disqualified you is what qualifies you most. You didn't suffer for nothing. You suffered so you could remember your power, reclaim your voice, and rise. Not just for yourself, but for everyone still trapped in the pain you now carry with grace. You are not just a survivor, you are a transmitter of healing, a keeper of ancient codes, a living, breathing permission slip for others to rise too. So the question now is no longer, why did this happen to me? The question is, how can I use what happened to me to uplift the world? How can I turn this pain into poetry? How can I turn this silence into song? How can I turn this brokenness into a bridge for others to cross into their own wholeness? Because when you do that, when you choose to become the gift, you don't just heal yourself, you become a ripple in the collective field. You become a node of light in a web of awakening souls, and that is not small, that is not trivial, that is everything. You were never meant to stay in the shadows of your suffering. You were meant to rise from it and illuminate the path for others. You were meant to become proof that pain does not destroy, it refines. And when you embody that truth, you don't just speak wisdom, you become it. Now, the world is waiting, not for your perfection, but for your presence. Not for your answers, but for your authenticity. You are the gift. Now give it.